Welcome to the Kimbell on Louis Kahn's 125th birthday, which is today. It is a great pleasure to have with us Sue Ann Kahn, the architect's daughter, of course. And Sue Ann, throughout her career, she has been a flutist and chamber musician, and she has been hailed as the consummate interpreter of music of all styles. She was honored with one of the first solo recitalist fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts in recognition of her outstanding gifts as a flutist, and she received the American New Music Consortium Award for distinguished performances of contemporary music. She has recorded recorded from all periods, and most recently, the Mozart Flute Quartets. Like her father, she is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and she has taught flute and chamber music on the faculties of Bennington College, the New School's Manns College of Music, and Columbia University. And she has also worked tirelessly for many decades to preserve, protect, and promote the legacy of her father. And we are so grateful to her for that. And that includes the exhibition of Pastels by Louis Kahn that you will remember from our 2017 exhibition that we had here at the Kimbell. And she has most recently edited and published the facsimile of Louis Kahn's last notebook, which we are here to talk about tonight. And she will be available at the end of our talk to sign books up in the museum shop. So we're so thrilled to have her here tonight. What a wonderful way to celebrate Kahn's 125th birthday. And as I said before, you can see Kahn on the screen here in that very famous photograph. This is the whole photograph. And you can see he was standing right there when this photograph was taken. And you see that streak of light that is a recurring theme throughout Louis Kahn's work, and even in the notebook. You will see the last page that he sketched on in the notebook is a star with a streak of light leading to it. So just, this audience knows Louis Kahn extremely well. I don't think we need to go through his career, but I did want to show you a few images of works by Louis Kahn, starting with Louis Kahn in another famous Kahn photograph taken in the Yale University Art Gallery, his first major public commission. And you see him looking up at the famous tetrahedral ceiling there, the Salk Institute. The Phillips Exeter Academy Library. The Yale Center for British Art, and the National Assembly building in Bangladesh, which was completed posthumously. And it's a building that I am so dying to see. I have never been there, and I am just so eager to see this building. And finally, an interior view of that same building. And now we have a few slides of the notebook that I'm very eager to hear from Sue Ann about. Sue Ann spent 16 years working to get this notebook published, a facsimile of the notebook and its companion volume, which explains what you see in the notebook. But these are some of the slides. This afternoon, I was thrilled to notice in this slide Florence right there, and I realized that's the baptistry in Florence, I do believe. But Sue Ann, I want to ask you to begin with, why this notebook?
Well, my father left 18 notebooks that we have. I own 5 of them. I know what's in all 18. But I always felt that this particular book was special. I was always drawn to it, and I always wanted to share it because I felt that it had my father's personality in it. And every time I opened it, I just felt very close to my father. And as I began to research it while publishing the facsimile and then doing all the research to produce this companion book, I began to discover why. And this book, it's very special. It's first of all chronological. My father always had something to write in that he took on his travels, plane or train or bus or wherever he was traveling, he always had something to write in. And of course, artists' notebooks are famous expressions of creation. And this book happens to be chronological. Now, not all the notebooks were chronological. For instance, 2 years before he wrote in this book, he did a lecture at Tulane University, and he was flying into New Orleans, and the plane was coming down, and you know how you see as you descend, you see all the cloud formations, and he saw light streaming through the clouds, and he made a series of quick drawings, 6, 7, 8, probably in the space of 5 minutes as the plane is going down. And later he picked up the book and said, oh, I already drew in this, turned it around, started from the back, and made some notes. And the whole rest of it is blank pages. So he did not have a systematic approach to the notebooks. He just grabbed whatever he had and wrote in it. This book, however, starts the very first drawings of this book, which are of the very beginnings of his ideas for the monument to Franklin Delano Roosevelt in New York, which we will talk about. They're the very first things in the book, and they were done just about a year before he died, in late February 1973. And the very last drawings in this book were the very last drawings he ever made of that project. And the very last drawings in the book that were not Franklin Roosevelt were of a project which we will get to, and he had just had a trip to Iran where he was going to build a fantastic city, which nobody hardly knew about. I know nothing about it, but I found out about it, and that was right before he died. So the book progresses during the whole last year of his life. He also signed and dated the book. He didn't sign or date any of the other notebooks. And there's some very personal things. This is a very interesting page. Once I finally found a publisher for this, then I had to figure out what was in this book. I knew about the Roosevelt Island drawings because I had lent the book in 2002 to an exhibition at the Cooper Union, which was mounted to try to get interest in building the Roosevelt Island Memorial, which was completed in 2012. And I lent the book because I knew it had Roosevelt Island drawings in it. But then I thought, well, what's this page? And it looks like, these are people from the art world. Patricia Morgan was Isamu Noguchi's mistress. Now, you all know that my father was very close to Noguchi from the Noguchi Garden right here at the Kimbell. And other people are from the art world. Here's where he signed and dated it. William Katz, Bill Katz is a very famous designer. He's the only person notated on this page that's still alive. And he's a very famous designer. Anselm Kiefer exhibitions, Roy Lichtenstein, he designed all these things. But at that time, in 1973, he was printing artist books. And my father collected books, and this is probably why he signed with his pen my father's books. And then my father borrowed his pen and did the signature. And I was able to talk to Bill Katz about this, which is pretty thrilling. So I thought, well, the Kieslers, well, they had a foundation that supported architects. He's at a party in New York. That's what I thought. This looks like he's at a party. So I went to his calendar. Now, all during the research for this book, I went through my father's calendar day by day. And I was able to trace all the events of his life through the last year of his life in a way I never could when he was alive. My father was, as you can see by the Bangladesh thing, he was building things all over the world. And at the time he died, the Bangladesh building was under construction. The Yale Center for British Art was under construction. He had done a lot with the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, but he was still designing buildings for it. He had 2 projects in Jerusalem. He was doing something for Rice University, and he was, of course, doing the De Menil Center, which, after he died, Renzo Piano built that building here in Texas. He had a project in Berkeley, California. He was doing something in Maryland. He was doing a project in Morocco, and he had something in Nepal. And then, as we will find out later, he was building with Kenzo Tange, a Japanese architect, very famous. They were going to build a whole city north of Tehran. So I hardly saw him that last year, as you can imagine. Even when I went down to Philadelphia, he might not have been there. He was all over the world at a time when architects really didn't travel like they do now. Maybe Corbusier was an example. But people didn't do that. But he really wore himself out traveling. So anyway, I looked at his calendar for this date, May 16th, 1973. Where was he? And on his calendar, it says Brunner Award. Now, the Brunner Award is an architecture award given by the American Academy of Arts and Letters to an up-and-coming architect. My father had won it in 1961, and my father was a member of the Academy, but I looked up who won it this year. And it was Robert Venturi, which is possibly a name that you may know, a very famous architect. And I thought, well, I bet you my father probably nominated him for that award, which turned out to be true. And maybe he was going there to see Bob get the award, and he went to the party afterwards and collected all these names, contact information. So I called I talked to the collections manager at the archive where the calendar is, and he said, well, just because it's in the calendar doesn't mean he went there. But he had lots of things in his calendar where he really didn't go. So I contacted the American Academy, and I found out, they said, oh, give us 10 minutes, we'll find out if he attended Bob Venturi's award. Well, 10 minutes later, I got a call and said, well, Robert Venturi was there. Yes, he got an award. Yes, your father was there. But your father won the gold medal for architecture that day. That wasn't in his calendar. So he was at the party that day, and he collected all these things. Do we have the next slide of the? Yeah, so there he is. I went to the Academy archives. This is my first research project into their book. I was so thrilled to find this out. And not only that, I found out that the book had sketches on the other page that didn't have all the contact information. That was the sketches for his speech. I found that out in the archive. I looked for a picture of my father with a notebook giving a speech. I didn't find that. But what I did find is my father at the party. And that's his notebook with the program stuck in it. And there was a very spooky thing about this photograph. That's my mother there, and my father's having a very heated conversation over there, glass in hand, chatting it up as he always was wont to do. And the whole time I was working on this book was a very short time frame from the time that Lars Muller and I decided to do this was just under a year from when it really came out, which meant raising the money, figuring out how we're going to do. There are many ways to do a facsimile, I found out, deciding what to do all the research, get it printed, get it out. The whole time I was working on this, which was pretty intense, especially since I'm a musician, I'd never done anything like this before. Every time I went out somewhere, I kept thinking, I just want to wear this necklace. And I have plenty of things. I always liked it because it was a necklace that my father gave my mother. And it's cornelians, it's rough cornelians. I just always liked it. I kept wearing it. And it wasn't until the book was published that I realized my mother is wearing this necklace. So every time I talk about the book, I feel I must wear it. I felt my parents were looking out for me while I was doing this whole project, both of them. So it was quite a revelation to me in many ways. So here are some of the sketches of Roosevelt Island, the very first sketches. There are 11 sketches on one page, one tiny page. This book is exactly the same size as the original. So on this page, I don't think I'm going to find it.
You know, it might be helpful to advance to some of the photographs of the built Roosevelt Island and then come back.
Okay.
Here, shall we
whenever,
do that?
Sure.
So, here. So this is what we're looking at, sketches that become that building, that space.
Yeah, so there are 11 of these sketches in a tiny page. And he hasn't decided, do you progress up to the main monument or do you walk down to the main monument? He hadn't even decided that, and this is a very early stage. Remember, these are very blown up, but there are 11 of these tiny sketches on one page. He was probably on a train somewhere and he was thinking, you know, brain to hand. He's thinking what he is going to do. This is an earlier, it's called a bastion scheme, where a huge tower that was clad in stainless steel, like the British Art Center, but that was shot down early because of price, and the final design doesn't look anything like that. How many of you have been to Roosevelt Island in New York? Yeah, you see, you know, it doesn't look anything like that. And there was going to be a statue. Roosevelt was going to be on a statue and maybe in a chair. I don't know. He was trying to think of what to do. So this is how the book begins. And there's more. Oh, okay, sorry about that. Is this better? Okay, sorry. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. So that's what finally happened. So later on in the book, he did a series of 8 charcoal drawings. And he was, in these drawings, he's showing how you're going to feel if you go there, walking through it. What are you going to do? Are you going to have a picnic on the lawn? And you can see the New York skyline there. And the drawings are full of feeling. And we don't know why he made the drawings, one of which he signed. Yeah, you go up the steps.
So that's
Yeah. You can see that. And there's a bust of Roosevelt. So he takes you on a little tour, and I think he possibly made those drawings thinking about making a huge presentation drawing for a fundraiser, because at this point he had finished this project. It was very unusual on my father's over to conceive of, start, and finish a project within a year. I would say that's unheard of.
I think so from
It's
what I've
unheard
heard.
of. But with this, he did, lucky for us. And the next thing, now that he finished the design, you have to raise money for it. So he would do a big presentation drawing showing what it was going to feel like to be there. And I think these are preliminary sketches in the book, and there's a series of them.
And then what is this?
Pardon?
What is this? This photograph here.
This photograph this is a model from 1973. This model was the model he was using to show, to enliven the model with these drawings. He was using the drawings to enliven the model. So the end monument turned out to be this, blocks of stone, which...
Who was the patron of Roosevelt Island? Who was funding it?
Well, in the end, it was the Roosevelt Foundation that funded it.
Were they involved at the very beginning?
No, they weren't. In fact, they were funding a memorial in Washington, D.C., but the plans for that fell apart, so they turned to do this one, and this was only after the 2002 exhibition, for which I loaned this book, then that sort of kicked off things. And I think my brother's film, My Architect, I'm sure you've all seen that, that helped raise the idea of it too. So.
And you can see the room, the final room, when you visit. You go up the stairs,
Right.
and then you end up in this little room right there.
Right, so in the end, you go down to the end of the island.
The room is right there.
All these photographs are in this companion book, which shows the model, and there are a lot of explanatory drawings that he did to explain what's in the book.
The companion volume is really wonderful. The architect, Michael, the architectural historian, Michael Lewis, wrote captions for everything describing what you're seeing, and it's a wonderful companion to the notebook.
Yeah, Michael wrote the essay, and I did the research for the essay, and I actually wrote all the captions.
Oh, excuse me, Sue Ann wrote the captions.
That's okay. Yes. I defer to Michael. He wrote a marvelous essay explaining how this fits into my father's oeuvre, and also how people use notebooks, how artists use notebooks. So now we have another wonderful example of some of the research stories that I have. Could we see the, maybe it's, so there are these, after the Roosevelt Island charcoal sketches, there are these drawings in charcoal. And I had no idea what these were. And the collections manager at Penn said, oh, this is the Abbasabad project. I said, what's the Abbasabad project? So I had to find out. Turns out that he and Kenzo Tange, Japanese architect, were to build a whole city north of Tehran, and you're looking at a site plan. The Arbuz Mountains are on the top, and the city is down below. And I said to Michael Lewis, who was writing this essay, and I were at the archives and with the original book, and we said, could we see Lou's drawings for this project to get an idea of what is this? And out came a huge roll of yellow trace drawings, which had blocks. You see these little blocks here. Blocks of color, and these were huge drawings. And we're looking at them, trying to see, and they're site plans showing what buildings were going to go where, not the actual building plan, not the actual building ideas, but where they were to be placed and how the community was going to work in the landscape. And we're looking through them, and all of a sudden we see a little white page. And we look at each other and we say, that's a notebook page. There's a missing page in this notebook right around in this Iran project. So I had the book, and we took the page, and I had the book, and we lined it up, and darned if it wasn't a page from the notebook that we just found stuck in this group of drawings. So Lars Muller and I decided to put it back to the original. So in fact, we have this page. Now I found out why it was missing. My father did this drawing the very last day he was in Iran, and I found that out from a wonderful Iranian architect who now lives in Florida. He was the project architect and young architect who was working in my father's office, and he drove my father all around Iran and helped him navigate things. And he told me that the very last thing before my father got on the plane to go back, and this was in January of 1974, he did this drawing without all the writing on it. He did the drawing in a little notebook, which was this. And then I found out through research at the archives, he tore the drawing out of the book. Now, This book has perforated pages like the original. All the pages are perforated, and you could easily tear one out. And he had it photocopied, and he sent the photocopy around to Kenzo Tange, to the Iranian architect that was working with him, to a construction architect in France, and he just sent it around. And then later on, when Jaimini Mehta and Romualdo Giurgola did a book, maybe even in the bookstore, I don't know. There's a book about my father's architecture that was worked on while my father was alive. And he took the photocopy and made notations of what all these things were. You know, this was the place of civic and national meeting place and all this. And all of my father's writings are transliterated in this book. That was my project. And he showed what all these things were going to be. And his idea for this was the mountains and the whole plan was nestled there. And this was going to be a huge city. So could we go back to the yeah. So at the bottom of the original very, very emotional charcoal drawings is this tiny little stretch, and it's blown up here so you can see. So I got a chance to talk to this Iranian architect who had been with my father, who had told me about the drawing and what happened to it. And he said he asked my father, what kind of buildings are you going to be building there? I mean, it was only the site that he had so far. And my father said to him, you will not be able to understand what I'm building unless you go to the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. So this young man took his family and went to the Valleys of the Kings in Egypt. And when he was there, he got a message that my father had died. So it's a very poignant story that I was the wonderful recipient of in doing this book. But you can see, this is his idea of what you would see of the city. There are pyramids, there's castles, there's towers, and this is just a tiny, tiny little drawing at the bottom of one of the pages where he's showing, oh, this is what I'm going to build. And this was the last project he ever did. He was going to build a whole city. And I think it's really quite an amazing story that I had no idea about before I started this.
So he was working on this with Kenzo Tange, the Japanese architect, as Sue Ann just said. And I found last week online on the Pritzker Prize webpage the ceremony when Kenzo Tange was given the Pritzker Prize. It took place here at the Kimbell in 1987, and the ceremony is online from that night, and it's wonderful. I encourage you to look at it. It's on the Pritzker Prize webpage.
The actual drawing of the looks like a head, which is all the landscape, whereas my father brought his ideas, these big yellow trace drawings, to the conference, and Kenzo Tange brought his ideas, and the drawing was my father's attempt to merge the two approaches so that they could work together. Because I don't think either architect worked very well with other architects. It was unusual. But the Shah and the Empress chose them to work together. So that the drawing, this drawing was my father's idea on how to have both ideas come to fruition.
Can you tell us about the process of creating this book, getting the facsimile made? What was the process?
Well, it turned out to be quite complicated. The original book is exactly the same size as this. However, the paper in the original book is very thin, and too thin to go into a offset printing press these days, which is how printing is made. In addition, my father often wrote on both sides of the paper. And there's actually, could we go back to the notes of the speech? I think you could see. If you look on the left, you can faintly see that there's something written on the other side in red ink. He wrote on both sides of the paper sometimes. And the original, you can't read this very well because the red ink that seeped through the other side blotted that out. And when you're looking at the red ink, you can't read it very well because you see the black from this side. So they had to scan each page twice. First they scanned it, and then they took most of the red out, but they still left enough so that you could see there's something on the other side. And the other side, the red side, you can still see there's something black on the other side. So this was quite complicated. In addition, when you have charcoal drawings and pencil drawings, you have to use very different kind of black ink. And they mastered that very, very well, I think. And in addition, these charcoal drawings of Roosevelt Island, when the book is closed on a charcoal drawing, it leaves a faint shadow of the drawing right here. And we reproduce this faint shadow as well. So there were fewer pages because the paper had to be a little thicker, but you can still see your hand. You can see your hand through the paper. It's thin enough. So it really feels like the original. And my initial idea all through the 15 years I was trying on and off to get this book published was that people would get inspired and take the rest of this book, half of which is blank pages, and write their own poetry, make their own drawings, write their own music, and use it. And if you didn't want to write right after Louis Kahn did, just turn it around and start from the back like he did. You know? And I mean, there are many thousands of these now, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's not a rare thing, and I hope that people will use it. When I got the paper sample, the first thing I did was I took a pencil and I drew on it, and I thought, this feels good. So I'm very proud of it, and there are people that knew my father and worked with him, and they said, oh, it looks like you just found this in a drawer, and you know, you have it. So I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, as I heard someone else say, the problem with writing and sketching in this book, you're up against Louis Kahn, and I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Just turn it around and start from the back. I actually have an architect friend who took it to a site and drew in it, so I'm happy to report.
And there's ink smudges on the cover reproduced.
Oh, yeah. Right. These are ink smudges, and we were able to get the exact same buckram cover. It was the publisher. I couldn't have had a better publisher. Lars Muller is exceptional. And beside this book at the bookstore, there's a fantastic book that he published about my father called Louis Kahn, The Importance of a Drawing. It's as small as this book is, that's how big that book is. But I recommend it. It's a fantastic book and shows the kind of thing that Lars has published. And I'm happy to say that he's so happy with this, he's going to do more facsimiles now.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And this is also the second edition of the book, and this is the first appearance of the second edition. We were not sure if we would be able to get it here in time for tonight, but fortunately we were able to.
Right, this is it's a special edition in honor of the birthday. And the facsimile is exactly the same. The commentary book is exactly the same size, but it has a few more photographs that I was able to get a little more information during the time, from the time that the first edition was made to this special edition. So I would say it's a more complete commentary book. But it's basically the same.
Well, we're in, of course, one of Kahn's very greatest buildings, and I just want to ask Sue Ann about the Kimbell and what the Kimbell has meant to her and to her father. What can you share about the Kimbell?
Well, my father did say to me that he felt when he was designing the Kimbell that some other hand, some other force was driving him. And he was never satisfied with what he built. And he was famous for changing things at the last minute. Even here, I think he tried to change something, and they said, "No, Mr. Kahn, we're not changing anymore." But I think he felt here he got it right. I think he really felt it got it right. And actually, for him to say to me that he felt that some other hand was helping him, it was like a direct line in the way I imagine the way Mozart composed, a direct line of creativity from the divine to the hand. And I have a very personal story about this building, which I visited many times, but I was with my chamber group, and we were performing in Dallas, and I thought, oh, I'm so close, I really need to get over to Fort Worth and see the building again. But I didn't feel very well. But I thought, no, I have to go. So I came here, and I was in the building for about an hour. And I came out, and I sat under the portico by the fountains and realized I felt completely well. And somehow the building had cured me. So I think there's something about the human, the proportions for the human being, how good it feels to be in here. And not just the remarkable light, but just the whole proportions of the building and how it's designed. It kind of enveloped me and made me feel fine. So that's a true story. That's a very personal connection.
Also, we haven't talked about the final page.
The final page, yes. This is the final page of the book. It's just a little star or a little spurt of light. And Michael Lewis wrote a very, very poignant end to his essay. He said it's like a magician creating a little star with his wand, and the magician himself has disappeared. And there's something very poignant. I always felt, I think that was one of the reasons I love this book so much, that it just felt like my father. It was like something from The Little Prince or something very imaginative. And my father loved fairy tales. And this just felt wonderful. That's the last page.
And then this is the cover with the ink smudges. And I also want to show these 3 pastels, which are hanging now downstairs in the East Gallery. And I'm so grateful to Sue Ann for allowing us to acquire these in our 50th anniversary year. They're pastels made by her father when he was on his fellowship to the American Academy in Rome and traveled around the Mediterranean. And these are 3 views of the Temple of Apollo at Corinth at 3 times of the day: sunrise on the left, noon in the center, and mid-afternoon on the right. He's doing sort of what Monet did with the Rouen cathedrals, showing a building at different times of the day. And I'm so grateful to Sue Ann for allowing us to acquire these.
Would you like to say what people have written about these pastels in connection with what's happened in this building?
Sure. An architectural historian, Eugene Johnson, wrote about these so eloquently, and he compared the focus on light in this building to the light of the Kimbell. And we actually quoted that on the object labels downstairs with the pastels. Also, there was a film about Louis Kahn that was made many years ago, and another architectural historian talked about these pastels. And he said that the Kimbell seems, on the one hand, to be so inspired by Roman architecture, ancient Roman warehouses, et cetera, but the feeling is really more Greek. It's, and you see that in the Kimbell, a Greek feeling about the Kimbell and the gravitas, and you see that, of course, in these pastels here. So I think, of all the pastels, I think these have particular relevance for the Kimbell, and I'm so grateful that they are here.
Well, I'm very, very grateful they're here, too. They couldn't have a better home. And I also want to make sure to say that the Kimbell Foundation was one of the major funders of the first edition of this book, and there are many people in Texas, in the Dallas and Fort Worth area, who also contributed to this, and I didn't want to forget to say that because it was absolutely crucial to having this project come to life, so a lot of connections.
Well, thank you, Sue Ann. And Sue Ann will be in the outside the bookshop upstairs, and she's happy to sign copies of the book. So we will make our way upstairs.
Any questions?
Well, questions. I want to save time for the book signing, but
Okay.
if there are any questions, we can take a couple. Yes.
The name of the video in 1987 that you were recommending we find online.
Well, go to the Pritzker Prize website. Pritzker, Pritzker. The Pritzker Prize is like the Nobel Prize for architecture. Louis Kahn certainly would have won it, but he died before they started. So they always are awarded to a major architect who has a considerable of buildings. They're not mid-career architects in general. And the award is presented in a major work of architecture by another architect. And so it was appropriate that Kenzo Tange's award was presented at the Kimbell. And the ceremony is fantastic. And we have Kay Fortson, for instance, welcoming everyone at the very beginning of the video. So it's just wonderful. But go to Pritzker Prize website, go to Kenzo Tange, Kenzotange, it's 1987, and then click on the full video, the full ceremony video, and you'll see it. I didn't know about it until last week, and I was absolutely thrilled to see it. Yes?
I wanted to clap at the introduction when we were listing all the things that you yourself have done, Sue Ann. So
She's tremendously accomplished.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about this. I get very excited talking about the whole process of this publication because I'm a musician and never did anything about like a book before. So to me, it's amazing that this happened, and I was thrilled by the process. I also wanted to say how meaningful it was to connect with my father's life during the last year of his life, when in a time when I could never do that when he was alive. So it was very meaningful. It's been a meaningful project for me.
And also, speaking of Sue Ann's accomplishments, Louis Kahn was a musician, though not obviously a professional musician like Sue Ann, but he was a musician as well.
He played piano. He made, when he was a teenager, he made money playing for silent movie houses, piano and an organ. And so we played chopsticks together at family gatherings. But I was only allowed to play, the bass. Dum, 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 dum. And he was all over the keyboard on the right hand. He was very imaginative. Probably could have been a composer. He had to choose between a scholarship in art or in music when he was a teenager, and he chose art. He was going to be a painter until he discovered architecture. And he remained drawing. He remained an artist, a visual artist, the whole rest of his life, as we can see in the wonderful pastels downstairs. I took another look at them today, and they really are terrific drawings.
They're fantastic.
Just fantastic.
Art with a C, architecture.
That's right. I think you can also say he was the first architect with the star
Oh,
at
is
the
he
end
Stark?
of the
Now he's
very
a
bad pun.
Starchitect.
I apologize.
Correct.
Okay, well, shall we head upstairs?